there is grifting, there is advanced grifting, and then there is whatever Candace Owens is doing right now. Because we've crossed a line, not a hot take line, not a conservative versus liberal line. We've crossed into historical forgery dressed up as courage, where anti-Semitic tropes are being reheated, rebranded and sold as truth the elites don't want you to know. And let me be clear from the jump, this is not about criticism of Israel. This is not about Zionism debates. This is not about holding governments accountable. This is about blaming Jewish people as a group for the transatlantic slave trade. That lie has a history, and Candace Owens didn't discover it. She rented it. The grift arc. Candace Owens did not arrive here accidentally. Her career has followed a very specific pattern. Find a marginalized group, position herself as the brave insider willing to attack them, package it as forbidden truth, monetize outrage, move on when the audience gets bored. First it was Black Americans, then feminists, then climate scientists, then COVID, then Ukraine, then the Jews. That's not evolution, that's market research. When one audience stops clapping, she pivots to another that's angrier, more conspiratorial, and more willing to suspend reality. And right now, antisemitism is trending. The lie she's selling. Let's say it plainly, because vagueness is how propaganda survives. Candace Owens is pushing the claim that Jewish people were primarily responsible for the transatlantic slave trade. Not some individual traders, not complex European systems, not multiple empires, Jewish people, as a collective. This is not a new claim. It's a recycled 19th century anti-Semitic conspiracy that was used to deflect blame from Christian European empires, fracture solidarity between black and Jewish communities, justify pogroms, expulsions, and later, worse, the only thing new is the font. What the history actually says. Here's the boring, stubborn, inconvenient truth. The transatlantic slave trade was driven by Portuguese, Spanish, British, French and Dutch empires, state-chartered companies, royal navies, Christian monarchies, plantation economies backed by European banks. Over 90% of enslaved Africans were transported by ships owned and operated by Christian European powers. Jewish people in Europe at the time were barred from owning land in most countries, excluded from guilds, excluded from state power, subject to expulsions, massacres, and ghettos. Yes, there were individual Jewish merchants involved in trade. There were also black slave traders in Africa. There were also Arab traders in East Africa. But here's the difference Candace hopes you won't notice. Individuals are not systems. Minor participants are not architects. Empires ran the trade. States enforced it. Churches justified it, not Jewish communities. Why this lie is useful. So why push it? Because it does three very convenient things. Absolves European Christian powers, redirects black anger away from white supremacy, creates a new scapegoat when the left isn't enough. It's divide and conquer with a podcast mic, and it's especially grotesque when delivered by a black woman who knows exactly how racial scapegoating works. This isn't ignorance, this is weaponized selective reading. The anti-Semitic playbook. If this feels familiar, it should. The structure is always the same. They control the money, they were behind the trade, they're hiding the truth, you're not allowed to talk about it. That's not rebellion. That's blood libel logic with better lighting. And every time this rhetoric resurfaces, it leads somewhere ugly. History does not stutter on this point. Why this matters for black people. Let me say the part some people don't want to hear. When black people repeat anti-Semitic myths, we are not waking up. We are doing unpaid labour for the same systems that enslaved us. Because white supremacy loves nothing more than black people fighting Jewish people being blamed for European crimes, everyone forgetting who actually built the ships. This narrative does not liberate black history. It erases it, replacing it with conspiracy instead of power analysis. Candace Owens is not a truth teller. Candace Owens is not brave. She is not persecuted. She is not saying what others are afraid to say. She is saying what pays. If tomorrow antisemitism stopped selling, she'd find another villain by Tuesday. That's the grift. no loyalty, no intellectual discipline, just vibes, outrage, and a donation link. You don't fight historical injustice by lying about history. You don't honor enslaved ancestors by laundering conspiracy theories, and you don't dismantle power by blaming the wrong people. Candace Owens isn't exposing the truth. She's selling resentment in bulk, and right now Jewish people are the product. And if we don't call that what it is, we're not thinking critically. We're just clapping on cue. The slave trade lie unpacked. So let's talk about the claim itself. The idea that Jewish people were responsible for the transatlantic slave trade is not just false, it's historically inverted. The transatlantic slave trade was a state-run, empire-protected, church-sanctioned industrial system. It required naval power legal codes, insurance markets, plantation infrastructure, international treaties, royal charters. You don't run that without state power. And Jewish people, for most of European history, had none. They were expelled from England, expelled from Spain, expelled from Portugal, confined to ghettos, barred from land ownership, barred from political office. They were not running empires. Empires ran the slave trade. Individuals versus systems. Here's where Candace plays a dirty trick. She takes individual participation and reframes it as collective responsibility. Yes, some Jewish merchants existed in colonial trade networks. So did black African elites, Arab traders, indigenous intermediaries, free black slave owners, Christian merchants of every denomination. But participation does not equal orchestration. That distinction matters. Because if we collapse individuals into entire ethnic groups, then suddenly every black person becomes responsible for African slave traders, every Arab becomes responsible for East African slavery, every European today becomes responsible for colonial crimes. But notice something. Candace doesn't apply that logic universally, only selectively, only downward, only toward Jews. That's not analysis, that's scapegoating. The black community and the bait. Now let's talk plainly. There is a reason this narrative is being aimed at black audiences, because unresolved historical trauma is fertile ground for conspiracy. When you know you were brutalized, exploited, and erased, but never given real justice, it creates a hunger for answers. Grifters exploit that hunger. They don't offer power analysis, they offer villains. And blaming Jewish people feels emotionally satisfying to some because it avoids confronting the full weight of European white supremacy. But here's the trap. When black people adopt anti-Semitic myths, we are not resisting power. We are serving it, because white supremacy survives by outsourcing blame. Candace knows better. This is the part that makes this unforgivable. Candace Owens is not ignorant. She knows how propaganda works. She knows how racial myths are constructed. She knows how black people have been demonized through false narratives. Which means when she repeats this logic, she is consciously redeploying it. That's not confusion, that's betrayal. Follow the money. Now, let's be honest about incentives. Candace Owens makes money when people are angry. She does not suffer from the fallout of her words. She won't be the one dealing with synagogue attacks. She won't be the one facing historical erasure. She won't be the one cleaning up the damage. She gets click subscriptions, donations, media attention. The cost is externalized. That's textbook grifting. This is where it leads. History is very clear about what happens when societies start blaming Jews for systemic problems. It never ends in justice, it never ends in liberation, it ends in violence there every time. There is no safe antisemitism. There is no just asking questions version that stays contained. Once released, it mutates, and Candace Owens knows this, which means she is not reckless. She is calculating. Name it properly. Candace Owens is not a truth teller. She is not a historian. She is not a revolutionary voice. She is a grifter who has discovered that anti-Semitism sells better than self-reflection, and blaming Jewish people for the transatlantic slave trade is not radical. It is intellectually lazy, historically false, and morally bankrupt. If we let that lie slide, we are not being open-minded. We are being played, and I, for one, refuse to clap for my own historical erasure. Not left, not right, just real.